I never thought a joke could unravel everything. But that night, it did. It started out so simple. A few drinks, some laughter, the usual banter with friends. We were sitting around the table at our favorite bar, the same crowd we always hung out with. David and I, nothing new about us. I was teasing him as usual. It was nothing malicious, just a joke. But I never expected it to turn into the first crack in everything we had built. You know, I'm pretty sure David couldn't protect me if anything ever went down, I said, with a laugh, nudging him playfully. My friends burst into laughter, the kind of laugh that always made me feel like the funniest person in the room. But David, sitting there, his glass halfway to his lips, just looked at me. I didn't think much of it. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? It was just a joke. I laughed harder, watching David look uncomfortable. Come on, babe. You know I love you. But seriously, if something happened, you'd be the first one to run. Yeah, probably, he muttered quietly. And for a moment, it felt like he wasn't even part of the conversation anymore. My friends carried on laughing, oblivious to the sudden shift in the air. But I saw it. I saw the way David sat back in his chair, his eyes avoiding mine. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was nothing. But when he didn't joke back, when he didn't try to make fun of me like he always did, something inside me shifted. After a while, we all decided to head home. The night felt oddly heavier than usual. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a tension between David and me that wasn't there before. As we walked to the car, I turned to him, expecting him to lighten the mood with one of his usual sarcastic remarks. You good? I asked, hoping he'd joke about my comment and we could move on. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just opened the car door and slid in, not looking at me. David? I asked again, a little more insistent this time. I'm fine, he said, his voice quiet, almost cold. I slid into the passenger seat, unsure of what to do next. Was he really upset? I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I tried to laugh it off. Come on, you know I was just messing with you. I didn't mean anything by it. He didn't respond, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I sighed, frustrated. David, don't be like this. It was just a joke. You know how I am. I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I could hear the edge in it. There was something there, a distance I hadn't noticed before. For the rest of the drive, we didn't talk. The silence hung in the car like a heavy fog. I hated it. I wasn't used to this. When we got home, he was quick to retreat to the bedroom. I stood in the kitchen, unsure of what to do. My heart pounded in my chest, but I told myself it was nothing. David was just overthinking it. I'd apologize tomorrow, and everything would go back to normal. But when I walked into our room, he was already lying in bed, facing the wall. He didn't look at me when I entered, didn't even acknowledge my presence. David, come on, what's going on? I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I'm fine, he said again, but this time there was a finality to his words that I hadn't heard before. He wasn't angry, but there was something else, something distant. I stared at him for a moment, my chest tight. David, please, don't shut me out like this. I didn't mean what I said. It was just a joke, okay? But he didn't respond. He just lay there, silent, his back to me, as if I wasn't even there. I didn't know what to do. I wanted him to say something, anything, but he didn't. I got up and walked to the living room, sitting on the couch. I felt uneasy, like something was off in a way I couldn't fully understand. Maybe it was the silence, or the way David's reaction seemed too quiet. I thought about what I'd said, but the more I turned it over in my mind, the more I felt like I had just made a harmless joke. So why did it feel like the beginning of something bigger? Something I couldn't control? The next day, David was still distant. He didn't bring it up, and neither did I. But the distance was there, thicker than before. Every time I tried to talk to him, he gave me short answers, avoiding my gaze. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it would pass, but deep down, I felt a nagging fear. The kind of fear you get when you realize you've crossed a line, but you're not sure where it was. As I watched him grow more withdrawn, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done something much worse than I thought. But what was it? I couldn't figure it out yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be easy to fix. It's strange how a small thing can grow into something so big. I thought it was just a phase. Maybe David was having a bad week. I didn't see the signs at first, not clearly, but the longer it went on, the more I realized I was wrong. We usually had a routine: wake up, make breakfast together, talk about work, laugh, and plan out the weekend. But lately, there was this shift. It was subtle at first. David didn't seem as eager to talk. When I suggested we go for a walk, he'd mumble something about being tired and then sink deeper into the couch, scrolling through his phone. The first few times I brushed it off. "You okay?" I'd ask, sitting next to him, but he'd nod quickly, not really looking at me. "I'm fine, just a little tired." Sure, I thought. He's just had a long week. I can understand that. But it didn't stop. The days dragged on, and it felt like I was losing him, without him even saying a word. Our dinners were quieter. Our conversations were more surface level. I'd catch him staring out the window, lost in thought, as if I wasn't even in the room. And when I tried to ask him about it, he just brushed me off. "David, what's going on?" I asked one night as we sat at the table, his fork hovering over his plate, but not actually eating. "Nothing," he replied, his voice a little too flat. "Just not hungry." It wasn't like him to not eat, not even when he was stressed. I narrowed my eyes at him, searching for any sign that this wasn't just a bad mood. "You sure?" I pressed, but he only nodded and kept his gaze down. I let it go for the moment, but the unease inside me only grew. The next few days were more of the same. I would try to talk to him about anything. Our old favorite TV show, plans for the weekend, anything that would spark even a little excitement in him. But each time he was distant. He gave short, almost disinterested answers. I started to wonder if it was me. Maybe I was the one doing something wrong. But then I'd remember the joke I made about him not being able to protect me. I pushed it away, convinced that it couldn't be the source of all this. Could one comment really change everything? "David, are we okay?" I asked one night, after he had sat silently for what felt like hours, while I cleaned up from dinner. He was sitting on the couch again, staring at his phone, not really looking at anything. "Yeah, fine," he muttered, barely glancing at me. His words didn't match his tone. It was like he was saying it just to end the conversation. I bit my lip, trying to suppress the frustration building inside me. "You don't seem fine. You're not talking to me. You're not even doing the things we used to do. What happened?" David's eyes flickered toward me for a second, then quickly looked away. "Nothing. I'm just tired, okay?" Tired? I wasn't buying it. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was something else, something deeper. But what? I tried to pull him out of it the next day by suggesting we do something fun, maybe see a movie or grab lunch at that new place I'd been wanting to try. "How about we get out for a bit? We could use a change of pace." He just shook his head, his expression unreadable. "Not today, Sarah. Maybe some other time." I felt my heart sink a little. "David, come on. You used to love trying new things with me." "I'm not in the mood," he replied curtly. And that was it. The conversation was over before it even started. I couldn't help but feel a pang of hurt. He was shutting me out, and it stung. The silence between us was getting louder. I didn't know how to fix it, and for the first time I felt like I couldn't control this. I tried to distract myself. I stayed busy at work, spent more time with friends, anything to avoid thinking about the fact that my husband seemed to be slipping away. But every time I came home, the tension was still there, thick and suffocating. I hated this feeling. I hated that I couldn't make him talk to me. It was like there was this invisible wall between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break it down. I was scared, though. I didn't want to admit it, but the fear was there, deep down. The fear that maybe, just maybe, I had pushed him too far. That my joke, the one I thought was harmless, had shattered something inside of him that I couldn't fix. As the days went on, I started to feel like I was losing control of everything. David was still here, but not really. He was present physically, but emotionally, he might as well have been miles away. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, to demand that he tell me what was going on inside his head. But every time I did, he'd shut down even more. I didn't know how to get him back. I didn't know how to make things right. And as the silence stretched on, I couldn't help but wonder if I had already lost him. I was sitting on the couch when I heard him walk in, the sound of his footsteps heavy against the floor. I looked up from my phone, expecting the usual silence to settle between us, but this time was different. There was something about the way he moved, like he wasn't just entering a room, he was entering a confrontation. "Sarah, we need to talk," David said, his voice firm but quiet, as if testing the weight of his words. My heart skipped a beat. "Okay, what's going on?" I put my phone down, instantly feeling the change in the air. I knew this wasn't going to be one of those casual conversations. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. He didn't sit down. Instead, he stood there, a few feet away, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His eyes, usually so soft, were hard now, cold even. "I'm done pretending everything's fine," he said, his voice low but filled with an edge I hadn't heard before. "David, what are you talking about?" I asked, trying to stay calm, but my stomach twisted. Something about his tone made it clear this wasn't just another one of his moods. This was serious. "I've been thinking a lot about that joke you made," he continued, his jaw clenched. "You know, the one about how I could never protect you because I'm weak. It stuck with me, Sarah, more than you know." I swallowed hard, a knot forming in my throat. "David, it was just a joke," I tried to explain, standing up now, walking toward him. "I didn't mean it like that. You know I didn't." "Do I?" His voice cracked, and I saw something in his eyes that made me pause. "Because it felt like you meant it. It felt like you were telling me I wasn't enough, telling me I wasn't even a man." His words hit me like a slap, each one digging deeper than I was ready for. I opened my mouth to respond, but he kept talking, his words coming faster now, like they'd been building up for so long they couldn't stay inside anymore. "I've felt inferior for a long time, Sarah. You might not have noticed, but I have. I've been trying to keep up with you, trying to be the guy you wanted, but I'm not that person. I've never been." He looked away, shaking his head. "But hearing you say that, joking about how weak I am, it destroyed me. It made me feel like nothing." I felt the room spin, the air getting thinner. "David, I began, but he cut me off, his voice shaking now. "I've always been passive, always tried to make you happy, keep the peace, do whatever you wanted, even if it made me feel small. But I'm done with that," he said, the words heavy with finality. "I'm done being the guy you think is weak, the guy you think can't stand up for himself." His words were like a punch to my chest. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How had I not seen it? How had I not noticed that I'd been tearing him down, even when I didn't mean to? "I don't want this anymore, Sarah," David continued, his eyes meeting mine again. "I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I'm not happy. I'm tired of being ignored, tired of feeling less than everyone else, especially you." I blinked, my mind racing. "What are you saying?" I whispered, fear creeping into my voice. "David, please don't do this. We can fix it. We can talk." "I've been talking for years, Sarah," he interrupted, his voice rising now, a mix of frustration and hurt. "But you've never really heard me. You never really saw what was going on with me. You just saw what you wanted to see." His words stung, sharp and real, and I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. "I didn't know you felt like this," I said, my voice small, my chest tight. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, he snapped back, his face twisted with pain. You were too busy with your own life, your own problems. But now I'm finally standing up for myself, even if you don't like it. David, I whispered, but my voice faltered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. He shook his head, his expression unreadable. It's too late for that now. And then, before I could say anything else, he turned away. The sound of his footsteps grew louder as he walked toward the door, and my heart beat faster, like I was watching the last shred of hope slip away. Where are you going? I called out, panic rising in my chest. I'm leaving, he said, his voice steady, but there was something in it, a finality, a weight that made my whole body go cold. I don't know if I'm coming back. I need space, Sarah. Time to figure things out. David, please, I begged, taking a step forward, my hand reaching out. We can fix this. I love you. I'll do whatever it takes. He turned to face me, his face a mix of sorrow and resolve. I don't know if I can believe that anymore. And with that, he walked out, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me standing there, stunned and numb. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was like the world had shifted beneath me, and all I could do was watch as everything fell apart. Was it really too late? Had I really ruined everything? I didn't know. All I knew was that I'd never felt more lost in my life. I spent the next few days staring at the phone in my hand, hoping, praying for David to call, or at least text. But my screen remained silent. Every time I dialed his number, my heart pounded in my chest, but each time it went to voicemail. I heard his voice, the same one that had always been so soft, so reassuring, but now it sounded distant, almost like it belonged to a stranger. Hey, it's David. Leave a message after the beep. Beep? I couldn't even leave a message anymore. What could I possibly say? Sorry? Was that enough to fix everything I had broken? I didn't even know where to start. I had thought that joke would be just that. A joke. A silly remark to make my friends laugh. But now? Now it felt like a crack had formed in the foundation of everything we'd built together. I'd said it out of frustration, out of feeling like David would never step up, but now that crack was a chasm I couldn't cross. I lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the emptiness of the house pressing down on me. I hated this silence, the way everything felt so still, as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to fix things. But I didn't know how. Was it just that joke? Was that the tipping point? Or had I been blind to how much David had been suffering for years? The thought made my stomach churn. Maybe it was both. Maybe it wasn't just one thing, but 100 little things, each one pushing him further away until he couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone again, but this time I checked his social media. My heart sank when I saw his latest post, a picture of him at Mike's place, smiling like he was actually happy. I felt a strange stab of jealousy and resentment. How could he look so carefree when I was falling apart? But then a wave of guilt washed over me. What did I expect? I had pushed him to the point where he had to leave. It wasn't just the joke, I realized. That was just a symptom. There were so many things I had ignored over the years, the way he'd always let me take the lead, how he never stood up for himself, how he'd always been content to follow my whims. I had told myself it was fine, that it was just who he was. But now I was starting to wonder if I had taken advantage of it. I tried calling him again. This time I left a message, though I had no idea what I was even saying. David, I don't know what to do. I miss you. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. Please, I need to talk to you. Please pick up. I don't know how to fix this, but I need to try. I ended the message before I could even hear myself finish. What if he never picked up? What if he never came back? The silence pressed in harder, louder now. I got up and started pacing the room. The same room where we had laughed, where we had made plans for the future. Now it just felt like a place where mistakes had been made, a place where every corner whispered regret. I wanted to believe I could fix it, that I could make it all better with just a few words, with a few apologies. But I wasn't sure if that was even possible anymore. I thought about everything David had said to me that night, the way his words had cut through the tension between us like a knife. He'd never been like that before, so raw, so unfiltered. I didn't know how to respond. He had told me everything I hadn't wanted to hear, but maybe I needed to hear it. I'd been so focused on what I needed from him, I'd never stopped to think about what he needed from me. But now, he was gone. He was at Mike's place, staying away from me, from all of this. It made me sick to think about him there, finding comfort in someone else's space, while I was left in this house, alone with my guilt. I grabbed my keys, my mind racing. I wanted to go to Mike's, to find him, to fix this. But even as I thought about it, I knew it wouldn't work. David had made it clear he needed space, and if I showed up uninvited, it would only push him further away. I needed to let him breathe, but how could I? How could I just wait when every part of me was screaming for him to come back? I sank back onto the couch, my hands in my lap. My phone buzzed, and my heart skipped before I even looked. It was a text from Mike, but it wasn't about David. It was about something else. For a moment, I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of everything fall down on me all over again. This was it. The realization hit me hard. I had driven him to this point. I had made him feel worthless, had made him feel like he couldn't be the man I wanted him to be. But maybe it wasn't about that. Maybe it was about him finally realizing he deserved more than what I had been giving him. He was finding himself again. While I was here, trapped in my own regret, he was reclaiming a part of himself he'd lost. And that thought, more than anything else, left me with the most painful truth of all. Maybe I had pushed him too far to come back. The phone rang, and for a moment, I froze. I didn't recognize the number, but the moment I saw it was David's, my heart dropped into my stomach. I hesitated before answering, my voice trembling slightly. "Hello?" "Sarah." His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Can we meet?" "I need to talk to you." I didn't even have to think. "Yes." I stood up, the sudden motion making the room feel even smaller. "Don't say that. We can work through it. We've been through worse, haven't we? Please don't leave me." My voice was desperate now, raw. I reached out, almost begging him to stay. But David stepped back, his gaze steady. "I'm not leaving you because I don't care about you. I'm leaving because I do. I need to be me again, Sarah, and I can't do that if I stay here in this mess we've created." I felt my knees buckle beneath me, the realization hitting me harder than anything ever had. He was really going. He wasn't coming back. The silence between us stretched on, suffocating, thick with the weight of what was happening. "You're not the person I married," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "You're not the one I know." David's jaw tightened. "And maybe you're not the person I married either, Sarah." The words stung like a slap, but I couldn't argue with them. They were true. I reached for him again, my fingers trembling as I gripped the sleeve of his jacket. "David, please." "I'll change. I will. I'll make it right." His eyes softened for a brief moment, but he didn't pull away. "You don't understand, Sarah. It's not about you changing. It's about me finding who I am without losing myself again." His voice faltered just for a second. "And I don't know if I can do that with you anymore." I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. "Please," I whispered again, my voice barely audible, but he didn't look back. "I'll be gone by tomorrow," he said softly, his voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. "I don't know when I'll be back, if I'll come back at all. But I need this, Sarah. For me. I need to figure things out." And then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room. I stood there for a long time after he left, staring at the empty space he had just occupied. My heart felt hollow, as if something inside me had been ripped out and replaced with a cold void. I was still gripping his jacket sleeve, but it felt like nothing more than a faint memory slipping through my fingers. The house felt eerily quiet. The sound of my own breath was deafening. I hadn't realized how much noise he had filled the space with, how much I had relied on his presence to keep me grounded. And now it was gone. I tried calling him 12 times. No answer. My fingers trembled as I dialed his number again. Still nothing. I dropped my phone onto the couch and buried my face in my hands, my tears coming in waves. Every sob felt like it was breaking me apart. The reality was settling in. David was gone. For good this time. And I had no idea how to put the pieces of my life back together. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned, I cooked, I watched TV. But nothing could drown out the voice in my head telling me that I had done this. I had driven him away. My words, my actions, my constant need to control everything, they had all led to this moment. For the first time, I didn't just feel guilty for what had happened to our marriage. I felt like I was losing myself, too. I had spent so long pretending I had it all figured out, convincing myself that I was the strong one, the one in control. But now, without David, I realized how fragile that illusion had been. I was alone, and for the first time, I wasn't sure who I was without him. I spent the next few days like this, lost, confused, and paralyzed by the weight of my own regrets. I replayed our last conversation over and over in my mind. His voice, calm and unwavering. His eyes, finally strong. The way he had stood up for himself when I had never given him the chance. I had taken him for granted for so long, thinking he would always be there. But now, in the silence of our empty home, I understood. I had lost him, not just as a husband, but as the person who had always been my safety net, the one who had always let me have control, who had always stood quietly beside me. But now, David was taking his power back, and I was left standing in the wreckage of my own making. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to reach out, to beg him to come back, to tell him that I would change, that I would finally listen to him. But I knew it was too late for that. What we had was gone, and there was no bringing it back. And in that silence, I realized something else. I had to start rebuilding myself too, because if I didn't, I would lose more than just David. I would lose the person I had been before all of this, the person who believed she could control everything, the person who had let herself fall apart without even realizing it. I didn't know how I was going to fix it, or if I even could, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go on like this. I had to find myself again. I spent the first few weeks after David left in a daze, not really sure what to do with myself. I tried to go back to my routine, to go to work, to smile at the people who asked how I was. But it never felt real. Everything was just empty. I'd gotten used to seeing David around, hearing his voice, sharing my life with him, even if I hadn't always appreciated it. Now that hole in my life was glaring, impossible to ignore. I kept telling myself I was doing okay, that I would get over it. But every time I saw something that reminded me of him, it felt like a dagger to my chest. The small things, the coffee mug we used every morning, the books we'd bought together, each one felt like a betrayal of what we had once shared. How could I have let it slip away like that? How had I gotten so caught up in myself that I'd missed the signs? Missed him? Then, slowly, I started to see the changes in David. It wasn't sudden, more like an unfolding, bit by bit. He started posting photos on social media, pictures of him hiking in places I never thought he'd go, with people I didn't recognize. He was smiling, and not just the polite smile he used to give me. It was genuine, alive, like the weight of the world had been lifted off his shoulders. And I couldn't help but feel it, the sting, the jealousy that burned in my chest every time I saw one of those pictures. I knew it wasn't fair to feel that way, but I couldn't stop myself. How had he moved on so easily, so effortlessly? I had been drowning in guilt, and yet here he was, rebuilding himself, finding happiness without me. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to hear his voice, to know that he hadn't forgotten me completely. I convinced myself that if I just reached out, if I just told him how much I regretted everything, maybe there was a chance we could fix things. So I called him. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before he answered. "Hello?" His voice was calm, detached, nothing like it used to be. There was no warmth, no sense of familiarity, just distance. "David," I said, my voice faltering. "It's me. I just wanted to talk, to apologize. I know I messed everything up, and I miss you." There was a pause on the other end, a long, uncomfortable silence. I could practically hear him deciding whether or not to respond. Finally, he spoke again, his words measured and polite. "I appreciate you reaching out, Sarah, but I've moved on. I'm doing well, and I don't think it's healthy for either of us to keep looking back. We need to keep moving forward." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it nearly impossible to speak. "David, please, I can't lose you. Not like this." "I'm sorry, but I can't keep doing this with you," he replied, his voice steady, but there was a certain finality to it. "I've done the work on myself, and I can't go back to being the person I was with you." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was the truth, and I didn't want to hear it. But deep down, I knew he was right. I had been the one to destroy our marriage. I had been the one who pushed him too far, who ignored his needs, who belittled him and took him for granted. And now, here he was, not looking back, not waiting for me to figure it out. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but it felt like it was too late. The apology meant nothing when it was too late to change anything. "I hope you understand," David said softly, and I could hear the hurt in his voice, even through the distance. "I'll always care about you, but we can't go back." The call ended with a finality that left me cold, hollow. I sat there for a long time after, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He wasn't angry with me. He wasn't trying to punish me. He was just moving on, and I had no place in his new life. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. Work felt pointless. Every conversation felt shallow. And every time I looked at my phone, I felt the weight of the silence that had settled between us. I realized finally that David was no longer the man I had married. He had changed, and he had done it without me. He was stronger now, happier. And the worst part was, I couldn't blame him. I had pushed him away. I had been the one who had caused the damage. I began to understand the full extent of what I had done. My need for control, my inability to see him for who he really was, those were the things that had broken us. And now, as I watched him rebuild his life, I couldn't help but feel the overwhelming weight of regret. The pain of knowing that I had destroyed something that had once been beautiful, something that I would never be able to get back. I tried to fill the emptiness with distractions, but nothing worked. I had been so focused on myself, on what I wanted, that I hadn't seen David for who he really was. I had pushed him too far, and now he was gone. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't undo the damage I had caused. It wasn't just about losing David anymore. It was about losing the version of myself that had thought she was in control, the version of myself that thought she could manipulate everything to fit her needs. That person was gone now, too, and all that was left was the painful reality that I had no one to blame but myself. I had spent the last few months replaying everything over and over in my mind. The jokes, the comments, the way I took David for granted. I had told myself that I couldn't fix things, that I had ruined it beyond repair. But somewhere in the middle of my pain, something changed. I started to understand that the only person I could fix now was me. I had lived for too long blaming David, blaming circumstances, blaming everything but myself. But now there was no more running from the truth. I was the one who had hurt him. I was the one who had pushed him away, and it was time to own that. I knew I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that David would come back, that he'd suddenly look at me and see the woman I was now. No, I had to let go of that idea. He had moved on, and I needed to move on too. I wasn't the same person I had been when he left. I had changed. I wasn't perfect, but I was learning, and so I made the decision to reach out to him one last time, not to beg for his forgiveness, not to ask for him to come back, but to admit my mistakes, to let him know that I understood the full weight of what I had done and that I was ready to let him go. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone for what felt like an eternity. My finger hovered over his number. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for this, but I knew it was the only thing I could do. I needed to close this chapter for both of us. I took a deep breath and hit send. The message was simple, but it felt like the hardest thing I'd ever written. David, I've spent so much time thinking about everything I did wrong. I hurt you. I made jokes at your expense, and I didn't see how much it affected you. I didn't respect you the way you deserved. I've been selfish, and I'm so sorry. I can't ask you to forgive me, and I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know that I understand now. I've let you go. I won't hold on to the past anymore. I wish you happiness, David, wherever you are. I read it over once, twice, 3 times. It didn't feel like enough. I had no way of knowing if he'd ever read it, or if he did, if it would make any difference. But I sent it anyway, and as soon as I did, something inside of me shifted. It was like a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't expect a response. I didn't need one. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me. I had spent far too long waiting for him to make the first move, for him to fix what I had broken. But now I was the one who had to take responsibility for my own healing. The next few days were different, quiet. The guilt still gnawed at me, but it was no longer suffocating. I started to focus on myself, on the things I had neglected. I went to therapy. I started exercising again. I reconnected with friends I had pushed away. Slowly, I began to rebuild. There were still moments when I felt the sting of David's absence. I missed his quiet presence, his steady calm. I missed how he used to laugh at my dumb jokes and hold me when I cried. But I knew now that I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep pretending that I hadn't made mistakes. And I couldn't keep hoping for a second chance that might never come. One evening, after a long day, I sat in front of the mirror and looked at myself. For the first time in a long while, I didn't see a woman who was lost or consumed by regret. I saw someone who was trying, who was healing. I saw someone who was ready to face the future. David was gone, yes, but in some strange way, that was exactly what I needed. I couldn't rely on him to save me anymore. I had to save myself. And as I thought about everything I had learned, the mistakes, the heartbreak, the growth, I realized that I had changed in ways I hadn't expected. Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I was stronger. And that strength was mine to keep. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I'd ever find love again, or if I'd always carry the weight of my past mistakes. But what I did know was that I was no longer the person who had made those jokes. I was no longer the person who had taken David for granted. I was someone who had learned, someone who had faced the truth, and someone who was ready to move forward. Whether David came back or not, I had a life to live, and I was going to live it. And with that, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to smile.